Okay, so this is a Mackenzie Shane Parvin interviewing Sarah Parvin on April 26, 2021. She gives her consent to be interviewed and recorded on camera.
Am I introducing myself now?
You're saying yes, I'm
Oh,
good to
yes,
do
I
it.
consent.
Okay. Yeah, so she's a student athlete, pre-health student, and childcare worker. So we're hoping she has like some interesting perspectives on the whole coronavirus. Okay, so the first thing I just kind of want to ask you is like any changes in like the sports environment at in San Diego, like if you can think of anything that's like unique challenges that like maybe only a student athlete would understand in the last year and how the coronavirus may have impacted your training or your competing.
I would say the biggest impact was like last year, so over a year ago at this time, our season was canceled. And I think what's different about running than other sports is like you train on your own like every break we go on, we train on our own. So we came back from winter break after training on our own for 3 months, which I think is more of a mental challenge to then getting our season canceled after training on our own. So I think that was a really big like mental barrier. I know that impacted a lot of girls differently where they just like couldn't bring themselves to continue running
Mhm.
just because it was so many days of training on your own and like having that taken away and the seniors literally ended. It was the coronavirus ended our season the day before our first race. So having like no races to look forward to was a hard point to find motivation. And then we were promised a cross country season in the fall. So we trained all summer on our own just to find out a week before that our fall season was canceled. And then we weren't allowed to practice together. And then slowly they started implementing like 6 girls could come to practice if those girls only saw each other. And that was called like a pod. But then you had to run with your mask on, which I think was difficult for a lot of people. And so the whole fall season was basically scratched. So we did not have our conference cross country championships up until February. And at that race, you couldn't have any spectators. So like I think it's a pretty hard sport to just go run 3 mile or now it's 4 miles on your own with no one standing there, like cheering you on. And then that ended up interfering with our track training since they were then taking place like back to back. So there's been a lot of complications. I think the hardest thing would just be trying to run alone with no like race in sight. So the last few weeks we've had a lot of races and it's been very nice, but it's also been quite strange considering we hadn't raced in over a year, more than that, almost 2 years. And then we've just had like race, 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 race. So it's like one extreme to the other. And now we can't have spectators at our races. So I didn't even realize how much I like spectators until I realized that when they're not there, it's just kind of it almost feels like practice in a way. So
So, how are you, as someone who has gotten the school record in the 800, been able to keep motivation? And has any of your teammates or maybe anyone else you know, like at a different school, like kind of burnt out because they trained so hard for so long and weren't given the uh, opportunity? It sounds like to like come back right away. Like maybe they felt like they wasted like a lot of training
yeah,
and
like wasted time training. I think for me, I realized during COVID that it wasn't that I just liked competing, but I actually liked running, which is something I didn't know about myself. I didn't think I actually enjoyed running. I thought I just like liked my friends and like the like anxiety you get with racing. All of that is what I thought I liked. But I realized at the end of the day, I truly just love running. Nothing made me happier. Over COVID, I think I was running more miles than I ever had. And so I think once I realized that I truly loved running and I missed my team so much over that time period where I was running alone, that as soon as we came back to practicing, I was just so happy to be there and happy to like be able to do what I love with the people I love. That training almost became easier in a way because I had felt how hard it was to do all of that training alone. And in my mind, I was like, it's been like 2 years of us working for this, so we might as well try our best. So I thought
yeah.
the motivation came almost easier post COVID.
So you got the this kind of leads me to my next question. It sounds like you got your motivation, your discipline from like intrinsic factors, but I wanted to know a little bit of obviously it might be different with a sport like track and field, but what is like the social aspects? How has it changed during the coronavirus of being a student athlete? Or were you considered a jock before the
Um,
coronavirus? Or did you get some social recognition? And has that gone down or stayed the
I
same?
don't think personally in college anyone cares if you play a sport, but I think the best thing about playing a sport in college is you're surrounded with people like yourself. So I live with all athletes, but none of them run cross country or track. So I think like the athletic community, at least I go to USD or San Diego, and here most athletes are friends with other athletes, which throughout COVID I think was very helpful because it was like no one was going out and doing a lot. Athletes were basically just seeing athletes, so it kept our bubble almost smaller. So social wise, I feel like it almost was the same because I really only saw athletes before anyways. But it was nice to have other people, I would say, understand what you were going through without having to like only talk to your teammates because I feel like sometimes that's a little hard and negative. So it's been nice being able to like talk to other athletes about going through the same challenges, but seeing just a little bit different perspective.
So you say like sports is like a community, like no matter what school you're at,
Yeah,
or
I think there's like a whole athletic community just because everyone kind of is on the same schedule in a way, like you all understand what it's like to have practice and like the same commitment. Or when COVID was a thing, at least at my school, I just feel like athletes took it a little bit, I don't know, more seriously, but like we were getting tested and stuff. So you almost had to take it more seriously than your typical college student.
were any of to follow up on that, were any of your teammates or maybe anyone else you know about at your school like did they either test positive or like get penalized for like breaking any type of protocol?
Well, yeah. So a lot of people on my team in the fall were testing positive. We had like a lot of freshmen that were living in dorms. And so I think it was pretty easy to get COVID in the dorms, especially like first semester. And so I'm sure they were doing like the best they could to stay safe, but that was a problem. The good thing about running is since it is an outdoor sport and we do have to wear masks, the contact tracing is a little bit different. And we run in like small groups, or in the fall we had to because of the tier we were at. So as long as like no one in your pod had it, you didn't have to what's it called?
Isolate.
Isolate. There we go. So that was good as far as my team went. But I live with a swimmer in volleyball, and our volleyball girls are like obviously a close contact sport. So there'd be like periods of time where they would go into a 2-week quarantine for being contact traced, go to practice one day, someone else would get it, and they'd come home and be contact traced. So, in my opinion, I watched them go through that, and I just think that was kind of hard on them taking someone who's like so go, 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 and then putting them into isolation when in reality, they were never exactly exposed to it. It was more complicated than that. But I understand we're trying to be like better safe than sorry. But
Uh, could you maybe define like contact tracing and any of like uh, the hardships that come with having to be tested? I assume like what daily, weekly?
um since there's so like they do it randomly for the athletes or like for every team, I think. So I get tested like once every week or two, and then every time we have a race, you have to get tested the day before the race. And then if we like after Christmas break, after like anytime anyone goes home, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks and get tested. Honestly, I feel like it's kind of nice because then you're getting tested, so I feel a lot more comfortable knowing my results all the time. I think my
Mhm.
nose has gone numb to having a stick shoved up it. But sometimes it is complicated because they don't really fit it around your class schedule and stuff. So, like, if you can't make it to the testing, you can't go to practice. Like, there's been times where I can't make the testing, so then I can't go to practice until those test results come in. Or, like, there's been times where I've literally been waiting to hear back for my test results so I can go to a race, which is great that they take it that seriously, of course, but it has been it's definitely had its complications. And then as far as contact tracing goes, I'm not exactly sure how it works. It's like very confusing, but they will call you and tell you that you've been contact traced and that you need to isolate from yourself, like from your own roommates and from anyone for the next 14 days or 10 to 14 days or
Did
something.
you or anyone you know have to do that? Like stay in one room for like 2 weeks?
Yeah, two of my roommates have done that multiple times.
What was that like?
Um, Terrible. Like, you have to wear a mask in common areas, and they would literally, like, they just couldn't do anything.
So they could go in the like they could leave their bedroom. You weren't like in a hazmat suit, like pushing through the door every 3 times a day or
No, it
something.
was just me and my other roommate, like, completely bleached the house, and that was about it. Like, you can like, as safe as you could be and just trying to wear your mask. It definitely brought up, everyone in my house has different views on COVID, so
Mm.
definitely some tensions, but
Let's
honestly,
elaborate on that a little bit. Let's get into the nitty gritty and like any confrontations or any weird.
there was a few confrontations where, I think we all just expressed our concern differently, and we all care about our sports obviously on our own levels. So I think like, to me, it was very important not to be contact traced, and it was very important not to get COVID, where I know that that's not the same for everyone. And so there's definitely been some conversations, but I also think that's honestly helped all of us because no one likes to talk about those things, and it is so awkward. So I think being able to, like, talk to the people about issues like that is something that'll benefit us all in the future. Because no one like COVID is an awkward subject. It shouldn't be, but it's become one.
Yeah, to get back on that, how do you think it sounds like your school has been pretty kept you pretty safe, like as an athlete. And I was just wondering if like if you know anyone or you've heard any stories of like anywhere else not following the same restrictions and
See, I don't have a lot of friends that play sports other than at my school,
Mhm.
but I think most of the rules are like NCAA rules. I'm trying to think.
Gotcha.
So basically, I think we're all following the same protocol where you have to consistently be tested. Most of the rules that they do, like for instance, when we take a bus, we can't sit next to someone and we have a seating arrangement so then that way they can like go back and look and you have to wear your mask on the bus the whole time. It's like we drove from San Diego to Vegas on a bus in a mask the whole time. And there's just a lot of rules like that where like I was hearing the trainers talk about it and they were saying like, oh, the NCAA just put out a video of this is how we need to put the kids on the bus. So
Mhm.
it's like the NCAA is telling our coordinators what to do consistently, but it's kind of crazy because I feel like they're just changing things all the time, trying to make it safer with like the testing and everything.
Yeah, and I wanted to get your perspective as like a woman athlete. Like I don't know if you heard, but of the women's basketball bubble that they organized it in, its
And the gym.
facilities, yeah, it was like a lot uh, more dilapidated and like less high tech than the men's. So I just wanted to get your unvarnished opinion on gender issues in NCAA collegiate sports, basically. You can be
Well,
as person as possible. I don't care.
I think at the end of the day, it is based off how much money your team's bringing in. So, like, men's basketball truly does bring in more money than women's basketball. So, I understand people might not like that I would say that, and I know people think differently. So, like, obviously, women basketball players are elite athletes who probably needed a better gym than that. So that is frustrating, but at the same time, like, I think it's a lot more confusing than people see because at our school because of Title IX, where you have to have the same female and male athletes, our teams had a lot of problems. So it's like they thought that was promoting equality, but that literally doesn't do anything because no one thought about the fact that our football team is men and there's no women's football team. So someone's going to have to off put the men, and that became women's cross country. And women's cross country is then underfunded because they have 30 something women to off put football, but then that just led to more issues. So I think if they're trying to like fight for equality, they need to think it through with like women aren't bringing in as much money as men, and that's fine. But then maybe there shouldn't be as many women in like certain sports. So I think they're trying to think of it as like just one big issue. Like we need to have the same women and men. We need to have like the same exact facilities where that's not true. I think women and men need different things as far as sports go. So obviously, like the woman did need the gym, but they needed to figure something out where it wouldn't be as expensive because yeah, there is not as much money to spend on women compared to men in sports. But
Mhm.
then maybe that has to do with like the people going to watch the sports. So maybe if they found in a new crowd, like more people interested in women's sports, I don't know. I think it's like a very complicated issue. But as far as Title IX goes, I think there needs to be some, what would it be like, where you additions to it basically? Because I think it's like a very straightforward thing where in reality it's much more complicated.
Yeah, and do you think if maybe like they donated more, or not donated, but like schools put more money toward women's athletics, do you think that would like make the sport a better product or like give it more publicity? Because
I think so. I think that men's sports, as far like even at my school, are just so hyped up. Like you'll walk into the dining hall and it'll be like a huge poster of a man playing basketball. When like I'm sure the basketball players at our school are good, but then there's female athletes that are 10 times better and no one's ever heard of them. So it's kind of ironic. Um, so I think men's sports are funded way more, which goes back to the issue they're bringing in more money, but they're bringing in more money because they probably have more money in their pocket already.
circular.
And it's like no matter how bad our men's basketball team is, like 10 years ago, they were good. So they're gonna like forever be hyped up. Where
Okay,
I feel
and
like women's sports aren't really thought of like that. Like no one really talks about women's sports.
yeah, unfortunately. Uh, so so this basically says like I'm thinking you didn't get so much hoopla around from like what you kind of described as being an elite college athlete. You didn't really experience. Would people know you were a college athlete? Like if you just went to class and you didn't say anything, or if you weren't wearing like a sweatshirt that said, cross country or track or whatever on the front.
Honestly, no. Our school at least is not a very big sports school. So I think most people knew I played a sport if they were an athlete. And because our school's small, I guess in my case, yeah, most people knew I play a sport by now. Just by like familiarity basically, like posting. Maybe now because of social media, it's easier to know like who does what because like if someone follows like the USD Instagram, like they're gonna see pictures of those people and stuff. But it is kind of crazy to think that like no one really everyone kind of is doing their own thing as far as college goes, I feel like.
So do you think COVID's kind of like heightened that trend, kind of maybe moving away from athletics just to like school in general? Do you think COVID's maybe caused people to be more separated, kind of like reinforcing a trend that was happening anyway, like making less of a communal aspect on campus because of social
Yeah,
distance?
I think it's like the same way COVID has made everything into like two tiers where it's just like separated the divide. So like people that already had their community on campus, I think like that community's gotten stronger. Like in my opinion, like the athletic community's probably gotten stronger, but then like the freshmen and stuff are probably in a worse place than they've ever been. Like I know kids are going home and stuff because if you come in with no community, like how are you going to build it? But then if you already have one, you obviously need that community because everybody's a little bit lonelier than usual, so you're going to like cling tight. But I know COVID's done that in like every aspect. It's just separated the two divides even more.
So as someone who's in like a fuddy-duddy liberal arts program like myself, uh, and is able to basically do the same thing online, is there anything like in like as a like health student that's like been extra challenging, like maybe not being able to do lab work in person or something like that?
Oh, don't you worry. So a few weeks ago, we had to have dissections with the sheep brain.
Mm.
And as an animal lover, I did not want to do this, so I did not participate, which was allowed since it was at home. So in my case, that worked out. But it also didn't because I'm gonna have to dissect things later in my like medical career. But yeah, I don't think that my friends' roommates were happy about them bringing home a sheep brain and then just tossing it in the trash. And I don't even know if that is like federally allowed to just throw a sheep's brain into the trash. I don't think you're supposed to
Good
dispose of
question.
them that way. But, I think things have been a lot harder, like, we do a lot of lab work and graphing and, like, there's just so much you need to know, and having that professor, like, walking around, the room and not helping you, especially at like, a lot of people chose USD because it is a tiny school. Like, in my capstone, there's 14 of us, but it's just still so hard, like, few weeks ago, I went to campus and just, like, wore my mask and sat outside her classroom because I so badly just wanted to, like, be in somewhat of a learning environment. Or, um, I'm trying to think of, like, other sciencey things that were a problem. I think because we don't like, you're not gonna do lab work now, so they'll kind of, like, put you into labs, but you don't have your normal lab partner, and so, like, not having that same partner or not being able to work in person, like, it's just a whole different atmosphere. I feel like learning's been a lot harder online, whereas it's not like that for every major.
Do you think it will negatively impact you if you like as you like go into the next phase of your like program?
Personally, yeah, just because I know I don't learn as well online, so I'm glad I got a lot of my classes out of the way in person before, like, senior year probably hasn't been my hardest year, but I'm glad I took, like, my sophomore and junior classes in person because I know I wouldn't have learned the same way. Like, even your professors now, it's like, "Oh, open note test," where that would have never been a thing, and it's almost like I don't want an open note because I need to know this stuff, but they know that no one's
Yeah,
learning as well.
yeah, everyone's you can't really enforce that. It's very
Exactly.
silly. But yeah, this just kind of follows up as with you know maybe like the difficulties of like uh remote learning. Like you're also work as like a nanny, and do you think that the COVID situation has maybe like slowed down like kids' social development at all, going an entire year without maybe interacting with people their own age?
It's actually really sad because yesterday I took my kids to the park and I was like, "Yeah, like, wear your mask, but you can go play on the playground." Like, like, a lot
Mhm.
of people are getting vaccinated in San Diego, so the playgrounds have opened back up. And the little girls came up after and looked at each other and like, "Did you get to make a friend today?" And she was like, "No, did you get to make a friend today?" She goes, "I tried to talk to this boy, but he wasn't listening." And it's just like you can tell that these kids so badly, like, as a kid, you're talking to 15 other kids a day, like, you don't have exactly a best friend when you're, like, 4 or 6. You're just constantly socializing, and you can tell they, like, have that want and need, like, even seeing me, they get so excited, especially, like, deep in COVID when I'd come over. They just wanted to talk, 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 and had so much energy, and it's just sad to see these kids being deprived. They had, like, a homeschool community, which they didn't go to normal school because, or in-person school because of COVID. You had to wear a mask, and the kids, like, it's hard to get a 4-year-old to wear a mask all day, and so they made, like, a little school at home, but it's still obviously not the same education they'd be getting in person. And I also nanny a baby, and she's just not talking at her age or walking or doing a lot of the things, and she's very connected to her mom, which is great and everything, but I think when you're around just your mom and your family as an infant, it's gonna be weird for those babies to start going into the real world.
Yeah, baby's gotta grow up. Jeez. Uh, so how do you think uh, you've been like in that job? Do you think you've like stayed safe, or do you think parents are just kind of desperate to maybe like leave the house a little bit?
Well, I started nannying this family in, like, September, and so I know that our views on COVID are different, so it was, like, in my own hands. We were both respectful of each other, so, like, if they were doing something I wasn't comfortable with, there would be
Mhm.
times where I would just tell them I wasn't gonna come to work. And so, like, if it interfered, like, with sports at all, like, I just wouldn't go because there was times, like, where you weren't supposed to be, like, leaving exactly or, like, seeing people outside your bubble. So, like, we've just been very open with the communication, like, "I can't come," or they, like, "Not comfortable with this type of thing." But they also, like, they do wear their mask. I think that they just I don't know, I feel like there's so many differing views on COVID and everything. But, I think it was helpful for both of us to be seeing each other during COVID because they definitely needed the extra help, and it was nice for me to, like, get out and spend time with them, and all of our activities were basically just, like, walking around the neighborhood or learning in the backyard and stuff. There was not a lot, like, as a nanny in the past, like, you take your kids to the park and the movies and do all this stuff with them. Our connect like, we I feel like I got very close to them because it was just so much one-on-one time, not really getting to go anywhere.
How have you had to been creative with like some of the restrictions, like as a like finding fun things for them to do? Like what's like
There is
something?
times where they would just start hysterically crying because I wouldn't let them go to the park and play with other kids, which is like so sad to me. But I obviously didn't think it was safe. So we've gone and like we would make our own like little miniature parks in the backyard and like set up slides or like use cardboard boxes. And they're not allowed to watch TV.
Oh,
So we've had to get very creative. I made them walk for like 3 hours one day.
did you get
'Cause they also just have so much energy.
That's really sweet. Uh, so you finding like they haven't been super negatively impacted. Like, could you maybe say like how old they are?
1, 4, 6, and 9. So I feel like those ages are kind of fine because they still have like their friends will come over in the backyard with their mask on and stuff and do like those kind of activities. So I feel like they're lucky because they just have like parents that are able to provide for them and bring in like a teacher and tutors and stuff. Where I don't think it would be like I was saying before, like the divide's getting even bigger. Like this family's able to have me come and help them and like other people come help them. And they still have like their 3 meals a day. Like none of those were provided for them at school. Like their parents are able to take over what schools do for like certain kids. So I don't think these kids were that negatively impacted. Like I'm sure it'll be hard for them to transition back into a typical learning environment might be the biggest thing, but I could still take them to the beach. Like the beaches were open. They are consistently like their minds were still going. They were still thinking like the mom, like I still have to read to them. They weren't just plopped in front of a screen for the last year and
Mhm.
fed like sugar. They're still like stimulated all the time, but I know that's not the case for every kid in COVID. So it just kind of like I was saying, it really like the divide I can just see is getting so much bigger because like these kids are still living such an amazing life where
And they
they're
have
still like, hmm?
Wi-Fi, which is like in like
Yeah, and
less.
they have beyond Wi-Fi phones and tablets and just anything they could possibly need.
Has there been anyone at your school, perhaps, like maybe to finish off, like that you can think of that wasn't able to remotely learn because of like some type of like technological disadvantage, or if there's anything you'd change about the remote learning experience if you were like, say, the dean of your school or something.
I can't think of anyone that's been super negatively impacted. I know that everyone has like problems. Not everyone. Like when I was home, our Wi-Fi was terrible, so it just was kind of a disaster. The remote learning was hard a few weeks ago. I had to give a presentation while I was on the bus to a meet, and apparently no one could hear me the whole time. I wasn't aware, but there's just not a lot of things you can do about that. If I could change anything, I would not let people use lockdown browser, not because I want to cheat, just because our Wi-Fi is so bad at my house that it takes me about 4 hours to get lockdown browser to connect, not exaggerating. This has led to a lot of mental breakdowns. And I have a lockdown browser test every Friday where my Wi-Fi is just not strong enough to connect to it. So it's just trial and error over and over. And I had to go out of my way to buy a hotspot to try and get that to work. Then again, I'm lucky enough to have Wi-Fi and a hotspot. So I'm thinking like what happens to kids that don't have this? Because my professors have told me if I don't take that quiz in time, they're just going to put it in as a 0. They don't care.
This shows the difference between liberal arts and the sciences because I have no idea what the hell a lockdown browser is.
So
I
lockdown
assumed it
browser,
is.
they make you download a software and it shuts down all of your tabs and your camera goes on. And so they record your eye movements. And if you're caught like looking up or down, or like if my roommate walks in the room, a flag will come up and they'll start watching you. And so your professor will then be sent the video because it's flagged. Or if they were to see my phone or calculator, it would be flagged. Um, like if there's any like writings around me, and I also share a room because it's really expensive to live in San Diego. And so I'm then having to tell my roommate, like, you can't be in our room for the 2 hours I need to take the test. And then it's just like a little intense and doesn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion.
Okay, so that's like one thing you change is lockdown browser sounds kind of like 1984-ish, but
Yeah. And I don't know where all these videos of me are going. It's a little
yeah,
strange.
that does seem yeah, because I do know that some parents have complained about similar things at the K through 12 level, and that is like
Yeah, like
very
if I have to go to the bathroom during my whatever 2 hour exam, I can't get up and leave. I would just literally have to sit here and pee my pants.
yeah, that's
And that has happened. I've heard horror stories.
that's dedication. learning. So yeah, like just any final thoughts you have on like the last year, like anything you want to maybe say to people who maybe not born yet or too young to remember the COVID crisis, and like just to kind of describe what like 2019 to mid 2021 was like, and how like maybe like the
Well,
most
I
bizarre.
feel like my perspective might be different than a lot of people because personally, I feel like I'm quite optimistic. So I can see like in the real world, it's obviously beyond awful and people were dying and families were dying and people losing like their loved ones. And other people were so ignorant, they just like didn't really seem to care, believe it was real. So I definitely understand that it was real and like people were dying. But at the same time, I feel like it was really hard to go a full year with that mindset and thinking so negatively. So I think the best thing to do over the past year, which I've really tried to work on, is being safe and like keeping to yourself, but also like working within your bubble. So like when I was isolated at home, like I got super close with my like younger brother and my mom. And I got back into doing like I ride horses. So I got back into doing that because that was like a safe sport at the time, like just you and a horse, no COVID. Everyone's easily 6 feet apart. And so
That
I
was your
think it was,
first experience COVID.
yeah, not that we know of. And so at the time, I just feel like really focusing in on the little things you love and trying to stay positive, even when there's such terrible things going on in the world. And I think it was a really important time just to realize how important it is to be respectful of others and to be kind because I'm sure if I had or have do or whatever get COVID or got COVID, there's a much better chance that I was going to be okay as a 21-year-old athlete. There was those random people where things people were getting sick even if they were in amazing shape. But at the end of the day, like we're really trying to protect older people and people with underlying health conditions. And there was so many people that just didn't care enough to go about that. So I think it was definitely an interesting year seeing all the types of people, but it was definitely some positives to come out of it.
You say it was a year that exacerbated people's like best and worst personality traits.
Yeah, 100%. I think you could see like the selfish people versus the people that truly cared about one another and humanity.
Wow, so that was a nice statement. I think that like kind of ends our conversation pretty well. It gives we thank you for your time here today, and it was like really enlightening to learn like everything unique about your experience. And I love you, sis. And
Thank you. That was good.